Okay, so hey guys, welcome back for my prediction of the Opetaia versus Nika fight. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video. And obviously, first prediction of the year, so happy new year to everybody. Obviously I've done a couple videos so far this year already, but nonetheless, hope you're having a good start to the year. Obviously this fight, first fight of the year, I feel like it's smart in general for any fight, any kind of big world title fight, even if it's not crazily big. I mean, on paper this fight isn't the biggest of fights. It's Opetaia who's making his homecoming, and I'll speak a bit more about everything to do around with this fight in just a moment. But I feel like just being the slot of the first big major fight of the year is always going to get more eyes on you because there's been a couple weeks of no fights. We've had the big end to 2024 with Fury Usyk, and then we had a couple weeks without any kind of fights, and so fans are wanting fights no matter who it is. Really, they're going to probably watch it. And so I feel like for a boxing fan wise and for a business perspective, I suppose it is good to be the first major fight of the year in which Opetaia has achieved. And Opetaia going into this fight is 26-0 with 20 KOs, and Nyika is 10-0 with 9 KOs. This fight is for the IBF World Cruiserweight title. Opetaia's last fight was a win via TKO in round 6 versus Massey, and Nyika's last fight was a win via TKO in round 3 versus Carpentry. This is in Opetaia's home country of Australia. Opetaia is a southpaw. Opetaia is 6'2" and Nyika is 6'6". And to speak a bit more about what I've just been saying, like I mentioned, this is for that IBF title. Arguably, this should be Opetaia's fifth defence of that title, but of course he was unfairly stripped of that title by fighting Ellis Zorro last year, so it's annoying that it isn't his fifth. So technically it's his, I believe, second or third now. So, nonetheless, it's that whole thing, that whole ship has sailed, but it's just annoying to see that this isn't his fifth defence of the title because he has been such a, to be honest, quite dominant champion now and has looked very successful with every fight he's had. And he's coming off another very good year last year, another standout year, another year in which he beat up more fighters, beat up more guys, and looked impressive with pretty much every fight. I mean, he had fights versus Ellis Zorro at the start of the year in which he absolutely dismantled him, and then also had Briedis, the rematch there, which was a very tough fight, and he had to dig deep again and show his heart again against Briedis, who's always going to be tough. And even at the age in which he was at, in 39 years of age, he was still very much up for the fight and very much knows the different strategies to make fights difficult for anybody, and was able to do that against Opetaia. But Opetaia, of course, still managed to get through. And then also he fought Jack Massey as well, and Jack Massey, a fight in which he managed to basically just dismantled Jack Massey and really made the corner have no other option than to throw in the towel because of how well he was performing and how much damage he was inflicting. And so nonetheless, like I say, it's been a great year for him. Fights in which, the Zorro won and also the Jack Massey won as well. Two fights in which, I mean, the Zorro one might have been the end of last 2023, but nonetheless, two fights in which they were against opponents in which he could have overlooked, and perhaps were opponents in which they're not the biggest of names. They're not names in which have that big of a following. It's not names that are really going to do too much for his brand, I suppose. But he managed to really dismantle them, and I suppose by doing that, it's doing a lot for his brand because he's just kind of been able to go through them and look destructive against them. And he's never overlooked an opponent, which is something which I really like to see because of just, a lot of fighters, they'll wait around for these big fights, big opportunities. There is one clear big fight in the cruiserweight division, but Opetaia is still taking these other fights. I mean, he was meant to be fighting Sin Cara. Of course, that fight didn't happen. Sin Cara pulled out. So this is still against an opponent who is a bit of a, unknown to an extent, and is a bit of a lesser opponent and is lower ranked. And on paper, he could overlook Opetaia. I mean, Opetaia could overlook Nyika. But I don't believe he's going to do that because he hasn't done that so far. Against Thompson as well, he could have easily overlooked him. He didn't do that. And that's something in which you got to give so much credit to him for not doing, because he's just looked so impressive by, getting all these stoppages, getting all these wins, collecting all these names, even if they aren't the biggest of names in the division. It's just who he's been put in front of. And so, like I say, he's collecting all these names, looking very destructive, looking very good. And to be honest, I would say he's due a homecoming. The last time that he fought at home was quite a few fights ago now. It was the first Briedis fight, which was an excellent fight. It was a fight in which definitely put Opetaia on the map and just definitely staked a claim for him to be a great cruiserweight. But it was also a fight in which, again, he had to show a lot of heart the first time. It was an even tougher test than in the second fight. He really had to dig deep, and he managed to do it. And I feel like this fight is a fight which, like I say, is overdue this homecoming, because I think obviously he's been a fight now in Saudi and collecting a lot of money doing that, but I think the Australian fans often they'll get behind their own. I think he's leading the rise for Australian boxing at the moment. I mean, it was at one point him and Tim Tszyu. Obviously, Tszyu went and lost versus Murtazaliev, and it was a bad defeat. And he's not looking at the best of times at the moment in his career. But Opetaia is now the kind of main leading male Australian fighter. The women's side are doing great things. The male side, not so much. And so I feel like the fans are really going to get behind his own going to get behind their own in him, and he's going to lead the way. And I think they're going to be a lot of support. I believe it's sold out, and I believe, like I say, he's going to get a lot of support in this fight. But also at the same time, it's New Zealand versus Australia. You've got to kind of realise that is a big thing. That is a thing in which, perhaps fans were expecting Nika a few more fights down the line to get an opportunity like Opetaia. Obviously, you've got to give him credit for saying yes to this fight and accepting the challenge in which Opetaia is. But it's New Zealand versus Australia, and you've got to think, when was the last time two Oceania cruiserweights were near the top of their divisions or world ranked? Probably a long time. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but in the cruiserweight division, it's obviously now got a lot more eyes on it than it once did, but still, like I say, to be able to have a New Zealand versus Australia world level cruiserweight matchup is just incredible to see, really. And I'm sure, like I say, all the Australian fans are really going to get behind it. And of course, Nyika, as a fighter, he's coming in on short notice. This is a big step up for him. Of course, he's only had 10 professional fights. His last opponent in Carpentry was really not that high level at all, and did look poor. Nika did very well to get him out of there in the third round, and it looked like a comfortable performance for Nika, but this is a big step up. Obviously, he's ranked 10th in the IBF, Nika, so there is a reason for him to fight for a world championship. Perhaps there was a lot of other fighters ahead of him, but that he's still there and he's still got his name about, and that's where the rankings are obviously so important. I mean, the Sin Cara fight wouldn't have happened if Sin Cara wasn't ranked top in the IBF. The rankings are important, and Nika obviously has put himself in the 10th position by working hard and, been moved relatively fast, which is often a case in which you see, maybe not this fast, but often a case in which you see for Olympic medalists. And of course, he got the bronze medal in the Tokyo Olympics, and it was a strange Olympics for him, where of course he had that guy, I believe the Moroccan fighter, bite his ear, which was a bit of a weird one. But nonetheless, he got bronze medal and he looked very good at that time. And often you see, like I mentioned, Olympians being moved quicker, and he has been bronze medalist, moved quick, 11th professional fight in for a world title. Obviously, he didn't expect it, but it's just happened, and it's, like I say, great to see. And to be honest, he's already been used to headlining. I mean, he headlined that last event of his. Obviously, he hasn't fought a 12-round distance yet. He fought one 12-round fight, but only went to the fourth round. He hasn't fought many rounds, to be completely honest, by the fact of him being able to get a lot of the fighters out of there, but he's been used to headlining and he's been used to putting on a show whilst headlining. It's just going to be interesting to see how much does he respect Opetaia as a fighter, because quite often you see when fighters come in, who are the lesser opponents, who perhaps have been looking up to a fighter like Opetaia, you often see fighters give opponents too much respect, come in a bit nervy. Perhaps Nika might do that. We're going to have to wait and see what kind of version in which he comes in as, but it wouldn't, surprise me too much if he comes in really trying to respect Opetaia, and I don't think you want to be doing that against him. Also, of course, on the card, like I say, it's a great night for Australian boxing and really getting put on some good fights. And we have Justin Huney on it as well, who of course went from fighting at a world level opponents to kind of taking a step back and then taking time to really kind of rebuild himself and make sure he is firmly ready for a world level before he takes that big jump, which I respect him for. You know, he's keeping active as well and been looking impressive in these kind of fights in which he's taken a bit of a step down in, which is of course going to boost confidence and increased skill at the same time to be able to show that he can fight at a world level. Also, Terry Moana's on this card as well. He's coming off that first round stoppage at the Monte Carlo show at the end of the end of 2024. So he's keeping active as well. Ayokuzo is on this card as well. That's another good fighter who's, I believe, 8-0 Australian fighter. He's been moved very nicely. Like I said, this is a real night of just celebration for Australian boxing from what I believe. Some great talent on the card and headlined by a great New Zealand versus Australia clash. And, like I mentioned, Opetaia as a southpaw is always going to be tricky. But Nyika has shown that he can fight at southpaw as well. I mean, he had times against Carpentry where he went to the southpaw stance. So he is perhaps, that was just a confidence thing. He knew that he was levels above Carpentry. I don't know if he'll do that versus Opetaia. I don't know if he's coming in with that level of confidence. I'm not too sure. But he shows that he can switch. And even though Nika is 6'6" compared to a 6'2" Opetaia, there's not really that much difference in weight and reach wise, and I think that's what a lot of fighters get caught out with, the reach of Opetaia. Because of how explosive he is and because of how long his arms are, he can really close the distance very quickly and catch you out with that. And I feel like he did that versus Zorro very well and really caught him out with that singular shot. And I think, they've got that similar reach there still. I mean, Opetaia the last time, first of all, he's used to facing taller opposition. I mean, Jack Massey in that last fight was just a couple inches taller, and the last time he fought a seriously bigger heavyweight was Thompson, and I believe he was 6'7", 6'8", which is huge for cruiserweights, but he managed to dismantle him with ease, of course, and the height really didn't make a difference. So Nyika, of course, being big for the weight, he's really going to have to use his size to be able to cause a problem for Opetaia, because so far Opetaia's been able to deal with size disadvantages very easily. Opetaia as a fighter though, he's of course, like I say, very explosive. I feel like that's probably his best attribute, and that's something in which he's proved that he can utilise very well with the lightness of his feet. I suppose his footwork being very easy on the eye and moving well inside, kind of in and out type fighter, and it's impressive to see. He's explosive. He has that one punch knockout power. Perhaps he hasn't stopped loads of fighters at a world level with that one punch knockout power, but he definitely has it. I mean, he showed it versus Zorro. He shows that if there is a level that is too low and shouldn't be fighting at this level, then he will showcase that, and he'll show that you're not ready and you shouldn't be at this level. And of course, we've then gone on to see Ellis Zorro lose that to Chev Clark at British level, who, Chev Clark went on to lose again. So, like I say, he really kind of showed that Ellis Zorro wasn't there and wasn't ready for all that fight, and he's got them fast hands as well. Again, another thing that's putting into his explosiveness to really just make him hard to control, hard to time, hard to know when he's going to throw, not predictable. He's got a swiping right hook. It's not perhaps a hook in which you'd suspect to have loads of power, because it's not thrown with the whole body twist into it, but it's a swiping right hook in which, like I say, is catching opponents off guard and is really damaging opponents. He moves well, like I say, inside, outside, very kind of light on his feet, moving nicely. He's very controlled. He's got a high guard. He's got, I'd say, disciplined aggression. Perhaps he's not the crazily best fighter in close. I mean, Nyika is definitely not that either. But he has that disciplined aggression. He's not going to force a fight. He's not going to rush a fight. A lot of the time, if he is in close fighting against you, he's trying to pick his shots where he can. He wants to fight at a mid-range, but he wants to be at that range where he can just spring in if he needs to, or if he has the opportunity to. He's good at returning to his range though, so if he springs in, throws his 1-2 punches, he'll then come back out a lot of the time and go back to, bouncing back and forth again, waiting for another opportunity to become available that he can set up by often going to the body with a nice jab when he does use that. He doesn't, like I say, force the fight, and he's tough. He's shown his toughness. His jaw got broken in the first fight versus Briedis. Perhaps, that's a weakness. Perhaps that could happen again. Not too sure. But he showed his toughness, showed his grit, was able to really push through. That was a great standout performance, like I say. And it's had to show his toughness. Nika definitely hasn't had to show that level of toughness as of yet in the professional game. And he sets the tempo a lot of the time, in which he likes to fight at his own tempo, same as Nika. So it's going to be interesting to see what tempo this fight is fought at. Negatives about him, I feel like sometimes he does load up on his punches a bit. Perhaps then he can become a bit predictable, or if he can sometimes wait a bit too long and take counters. Sometimes I think he will take counters to then load up his shot even more. Perhaps that's not the best thing. He took quite a lot of counters in that second fight versus Briedis, and even in the first one as well. But like I say, I feel like he definitely will take shots. Nika definitely could land shots versus him. He's got wide hooks. He's reacting to a high output can sometimes be an issue of his. Nyika perhaps doesn't have the most highest of outputs to really be able to struggle or make Opetaia struggle with it, but he does have a high output. He stands tall. He can slug it out in close, but it doesn't look as nice. It doesn't look as clean. He can look a bit, like I say, it does look a bit messy in close, and him trying to clinch, he doesn't fight in the clinch that well, and that's where Briedis kind of worked a lot of his best work, fighting in close, fighting in the clinch. Of course, he has that jaw injury. Well, he did before. Could that possibly come up again? Not too sure. Opetaia sometimes leads with his head a bit, so perhaps his jaw is more susceptible. He can admire his work, I believe, a bit from loading up and then admiring his work. His physicality, I don't think is anything crazy. Perhaps Nika, I don't think he's proven his physicality, even though he is the bigger guy, the stronger guy probably, but he just hasn't proved his physicality either, so I don't think either of them are that physical. His timing in counters isn't always excellent, Opetaia, and I don't think his back foot fighting ability is amazing. I don't think it's been proven. I don't think he's shown it at the best of levels as of yet. And Nika might be able to put him on the back foot with the size of him and his head movements. Like I say, sometimes isn't amazing. His footwork is excellent, but his head movement isn't always amazing. Nika, as a fighter, he uses his rangy jab well. I feel like perhaps he uses it a bit more often than that of Opetaia. Like I say, Opetaia sometimes loading up a bit too long and not using the jab quite as much. When he does use it, it's very well Opetaia, but Nika, I feel like, uses it more often, and like I say, is a rangy jab. He's patient. He holds the centre quite well. Perhaps he's more willing to go on the back foot than that of Opetaia, but he does hold the centre typically quite well when he wants to. He picks his shots. He goes to the body. He goes to the body well when he picks his shots, and he definitely landed nice body shots in that last fight of his and was kind of really whipping in them hooks to the body, in which something in which you haven't really seen Opetaia utilise that shot too much. He's a bit of a mid-range type fighter as well. He quite often knows when you'll throw. I think that's because of the slow pace in which he wants to fight at and the patient style in which he wants to fight at. He'll know when you'll throw, and then he'll move out the way quite well to be able to, manoeuvre out the way of a shot. Will he be able to know when Opetaia throws is, I feel like, a different question than the level of opposition in which, of course, he has faced. He's got strong power. I think it's different to that of Opetaia's. I think it is that pure strength power. He feints well. He keeps his hands up when he's circling, which is nice. Opetaia will definitely punch around the guard and try and catch you out with that swiping hook when you drop your hands, but Nika often keeps his hands quite high, which is nice to see. He will go high to low as well with his shots. He's often able to slow momentum as well. I mean, Carpentry was gaining a little bit of confidence, gaining a little bit of momentum, and Nika really just kind of shut that down, and that's where he got the stoppage. Negatives about him, I think he stands tall. He's definitely a tall, big target to get hit. I think he does fight similarly to that of Jordan Thompson, which is, of course, didn't go well when Opetaia fought Jordan Thompson for Thompson last time. He dealing with movers, I think, can sometimes be a bit of an issue. If he can't measure you out and can't kind of work off the shots like that, I feel like he can struggle and question himself a little bit. Sometimes he'll just leave his shots out, leave his jab out, just kind of following you around, trying to wait for you to stop moving to be able to throw. But if you're not stopping moving, he can just kind of leave his shots out and then just take a shot because he's just being lazy, not bringing his shots back. He's trying to wait too long. He is, like I say, a big target. I think he's in close dealing with pressure. I don't think he's had to do that too much, and how does he deal with that? And I don't think Opetaia is going to bring that in close pressure, but he's definitely going to bring a type of pressure, and how's Nika going to deal with that? His head's on the line a lot of the time. I think his chin can definitely be in the air. He if things aren't going his way. We haven't seen, like I said, this is a step up. We haven't seen how he can deal with things if they aren't going his way. He doesn't really throw many short shots, so if he ever is in close, a lot of his shots look like they're just kind of being a bit too long. They're looking a bit awkward a lot of the time, and actually being able to push you off, like I say, actually being able to use the physicality. He is a big guy, he's a strong guy, but actually being able to push you off and use that physicality, he just looks like he can't really do that quite well. It looks like it looks like he hasn't got that level of strength there to be able to really kind of get you off if you are causing a problem on the inside against him. And so, it's just going to be interesting to see how that plays out if it does go onto the inside between either of these two. Opetaia is the favourite for this fight, and I think that Opetaia will win via TKO KO in round 3. Perhaps it's a bold statement, perhaps it's me just really disrespecting Nyika, but I think that Opetaia is really going to be able to land big shots. I think Nika is probably going to get caught out to the body. Like I say, he does bring his shots often back to the head, but I don't think he's had to deal with the explosiveness, the power of that of Nika. Of that of Opetaia, and Opetaia is going to come with that explosiveness. He's going to come with something in which Nika isn't used to. Not going to fight at Nika's pace. He's not going to just let him control the fight, in which Nika probably wants him to do. So Opetaia, I think he's going to get an early stoppage, and it's going to be a destructive stoppage, to be completely honest. A big guy going down, and Opetaia to win in his homecoming. Then who we could go on to fight next? Obviously I did my 10 fights in which I wanted to see in 2025 boxing wise, and I said him versus Zurdo Ramirez. I would love to see that fight. Zurdo Ramirez is coming off a great performance realistically against Billam Smith, where Billam Smith is going to make it tough. He's going to be a very tough, durable fighter for anybody to have to deal with, but he was just completely shut down by Ramirez, to be completely honest, and Ramirez really showed his world-class level. And to be honest, he is the only fight in the cruiserweight division in which I really care about for Opetaia. When you look at the cruiserweight division now, it's looking weaker. I think there is a need for new names. We've had Masternak fall recently. We've had, Seslak fall. We've had Riakpor fall. We've had Bellum Smith now fall. We're waiting. We had Isaac Chamberlain, if you go to British level, fall. We've had Chev Clark in European level fall. We're waiting for new names. Hopefully we'll get some new names coming up soon, but for the moment, Opetaia, the only fight that really makes sense, I believe, is the Ramirez fight. Of course, the other champion is Badu Jack. He's just been recently reinstated because Mikhailian has had issues with legal issues and things like that. He's been holding up the division, and Badu Jack, who of course hasn't fought since 2023, the start of 2023, has also kind of been holding up the division a bit as well, but he seemingly wants to get a fight going with the winner of Opetaia versus Ramirez, so perhaps, that might happen, but Opetaia Ramirez actually has to happen first. I think it would be an easy fight to make. His Excellency, I believe, would make it, and I think it would make sense. If not, I suppose Sin Cara, the fight that was meant to happen for Opetaia this time, might happen. It might get ordered, and then Opetaia, if the Ramirez fight isn't ready, then perhaps that could happen. Other than that, you kind of have to look up to heavyweight and be like who he could go up to fight in heavyweight. I'd pretty much like to see him against any top heavyweight. I think he could pose a tough test against any of them. Usyk has been talked about. Eddie Hearn wants Usyk versus Opetaia. Perhaps that could happen. Usyk really doesn't have too many options. He's talked about going back down to cruiserweight. His Excellency wants him to fight Dubois, but does Usyk really care about that fight with Dubois because he's already beaten him once, clearly? I'm not too sure, but for the moment, I want to see Ramirez versus Opetaia, so hopefully it will happen after this fight, of course, if he wins. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did indeed, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.